just wanted to say, I just really felt like, especially when McDaniel said, hello, Roseanne.
Yeah, it happens fast.
You'll figure it out. And you know what? Is there something about us that you're just not liking? Is it that tax agreement or what?
I think that's part of it,
I think it is too.
but other than that, I really don't. I don't understand. Then they lost their contract with the UC, which that was a couple $1 million in itself.
Right. But they were paying like 400,000. They should have been paying like $1 million, correct? For as many times as they went out there. Is that allergy time?
So I was a winner, right?
It was gonna. Which one do you want? Which one do you want? You got.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our joint meeting for May 7th, 2024, and it's 5:36. Can we please stand for our Pledge of Allegiance? Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we can all please remain standing for a moment of silence for our first responders and military members. Thank you. May be seated. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Councilmember Roth.
Present.
Councilmember Soto. Mayor Pro Tem Samra. Mayor Moran.
Present.
For the record, Councilmember Mann and Mayor Pro Tem Samra are not in attendance. Planning Commission roll call. Commissioner Flores.
Present.
Vice Chair Mendonca.
Present.
Commissioner Wallace.
Present.
For the record, Chair Bassi is not in attendance.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hope not. All right. Okay, so next we have citizen comments. At a special meeting, members of the public wishing to address the council to address the council or the planning commission for any matter on the agenda may do so at this time. Note, under the provisions of the California Government Code, the City Council is prohibited from discussing or taking action on any item not on the agenda. Comments are normally limited to 3 minutes. Is there any citizen comments on the phone? Hearing none, are there any citizen comments in the chamber? Seeing none, citizen comments are closed at 5:39. Next, we have study session. Item number 1, Livingston 2040 General Plan Update, Joint City Council Planning Commission Study Session. Discussion and direction on progress report and land use alternatives.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, planning commissioners, my name is Jim Harnish. I'm the principal and owner of Winter Harnish, planning consulting firm that is your general plan consultant for this really interesting project. With me tonight is Michael Gibbons, the project manager, and together he and I are going to provide an overview of the general plan update, where we've been. We know it's taken some while, but we're back and moving again, and we're at a really, probably the most critical stage of the project, which is the alternatives process. And so Michael will do an overview of where we've gotten so far with putting land use alternatives together, and the next step, which is to analyze those alternatives. And the purpose of tonight's meeting is not only to give you an update, but to have a discussion of those alternatives and get some direction and feedback from you before we do any analysis of them. So this is the agenda for tonight. I'm going to do the first couple of slides, and then I'll turn the presentation over to Michael. As I said before, that's Michael and we are the primary project managers for the project. We're also teaming with two other consulting firms, GHD to help us with the traffic analysis, and Rincon Consultants, which will be doing EIR, and they also help with some of the policy document preparation. Winter Harnish has been, this is our 39th year of doing general plans in California. We predominantly do general plans, but also housing elements and zoning code updates. That's our bread and butter. We have done a fair amount of work here in the valley for collectively for the ACOGs, including work on the San Joaquin Valley Blueprint and San Joaquin Valley Greenprint. And we recently did a valley-wide housing study. So while we have other areas, we primarily focus on general plan updates, which we've done about 60 in our 39-year history, which may not sound a lot, except that we're a fairly small firm. There are just 10 of us in this firm, and at some points there have been 5 or 6. So we're a pretty small firm, but we're really focused on Northern California general plans. We have a great familiarity with Merced County as well as the San Joaquin Valley. We've prepared or helped prepare 6 of the 8 Valley County general plans, including Merced County general plan. We've also assisted Merced County with preparing their zoning code update a few years ago. So very familiar with the valley, very familiar with this part of the valley. So I want to just give you a brief overview of what the general plan is all about and why we're doing it. General plans are required by state law. Every city and county has to have a general plan. This has been a requirement since 1970, I believe. The general plan really represents the city's vision for the future. One of the things I like to point out is that the general plan is one of the few, if only opportunities a city or a county has to discuss this broad range of issues all at the same time and weigh trade-offs between transportation issues, land use, environmental issues, housing, zoning. And so you take a look at all of these things together. You can't get everything done, but this helps the city council prioritize what it does expect to accomplish in dealing with growth issues and change issues within the city. It really guides long-term decisions, and really through the community outreach process where the community speaks to the Planning Commission and to you as we're carrying on the engagement activities, we can carry back the thoughts and ideas from the community, so that it helps you represent the community in making your decisions. So the general plan is, as it sounds general, it kind of provides the foundation for all of your other policy and regulatory activities and documents within the city. Most importantly, the zoning and subdivision regulations are built on the general plan, particularly the land use element, and those documents must be consistent with the general plan. And then, of course, your building permit process really is the final implementation measure to assist with the growth and change within the city. This is just another way of illustrating the kind of the link between all of these different activities within the city. So state law requires specific elements for the general plan: land use, circulation, housing, conservation, open space, safety, noise. Environmental justice is a newer requirement that's just been in place since I think 2018, is that right? And then the San Joaquin Valley jurisdictions are the only cities and counties within California that are required to have an air quality element. It's specific to the jurisdictions within the regional air district here. And this occurred, I can't remember the exact date, but it was quite a while ago, around the late 1990s or 2000 when the requirement went into place. New state requirements that we are addressing that your current general plan didn't address, as I mentioned, environmental justice. There are increased tribal consultation requirements for anything that we do on general plans in CEQA. Complete streets, requirement that was adopted by the legislature in 2008. And this encourages cities and counties to look at the transportation system in a multimodal way. So you not only look at the roadways, but you look at bike and pedestrian facilities, transit facilities, and looking at assuring that your transportation circulation system is really accessible and beneficial to all people of ages and abilities. That's kind of the underlying purpose. Vehicle miles traveled, another transportation-related issue, applies to every city and county in California, not so much to less dense urban environments like counties, and to a great extent, Livingston, but there is some application to it. GHG is a big issue related to climate change. Climate adaptation is another issue we're dealing with. You don't have the wildfire challenges that many places do in the state. You do have water challenges, right? Water availability challenges. Michael might touch on those in a minute. And then there's also new requirements to provide increased sites for supply and affordability of housing. So this is the more recent focus of the general plan updates. So with that brief overview, before I move on, any kind of broad-based questions about the reason we're doing the general plan and the requirements for it? Okay.
Good evening, Commission, Council, Michael Gibbons. Thank you, Jim, for providing the general overview of general plans. I would like to shift specific to this project, however, and this general plan. So, believe it or not, we started in 2020, and at that time, the focus of the update from City Council was quite clear. So, one of them, the focus was to produce a new general plan that was both innovative and contemporary, so addressed both emerging trends, current best practices. The second, and really one is a kind of a goalpost that's constantly moving, is the compliance with state law. So there are a slew of new state law changes regarding land use and evacuation analyses and greenhouse gas reduction, as Jim had mentioned, that your general plan that had last had an update comprehensively, which was in 1999, doesn't address. There is also the need to look at goals and policies and how they relate to diversity and inclusivity within the city, being that there is trends with population growth, and also, again, looking at compliance with environmental justice and state law mandates. Another concept that we were targeted, or the focus of this update was looking at smart growth and sustainable development, and focus on reanalyzing the existing land uses, looking at the existing general plan and see where efficiencies can be made, or opportunities to bring in new development or kind of incentivize new ideas or industries. And with that, economic stability and vitality was also a focus of this update, and is a focus of this update. So looking at preserving the downtown, how do we encourage intergovernmental coordination, and coming up with a strategic plan for economic development and local industry to hopefully diversify and bolster the local economy. So here is the project by phases and schedules. So as mentioned, we started in spring of 2020. This project has a total of 8 phases, and we are currently at phase 5. So really at that phase right before we actually start preparing and drafting the various elements of your general plan. So what have we done so far? Well, we've gone through phases 1 through 3. Phases 1 through 4. Phase 1 consisted of a city tour, so we met with the city staff at that time, came up with a kind of a project running list of items to be addressed. Following that, in phase 2, we did branding, which I will show you all. We came up with newsletters and hosted a community general plan forum. And then in phase 3, this was setting the existing conditions, really the baseline information of where Livingston was at the time that we had prepared it. And that really influenced us and moved us into creating a community vision and guiding principles, which I'll go into detail a little bit further. I think what's most important, though, again, is that we are currently in phase 5. So evaluating land use alternatives. It's a very important step in the general plan process. The end product of the alternatives process is your general plan land use diagram. So the general plan map that you look to and to advise your various decisions on land use. Following an alternatives phase, we have phases 6 through 8. So phase 6 take around 6 to 8 months. That's actually preparing and writing the plan, followed by an environmental review. It's a necessity for California Environmental Quality Act to take a look at this project for any environmental impacts, and then also really tee up the city to have a successful environmental impact report, so you can process permits efficiently and be legally compliant. And then finally, phase 8 would be final adoption. So ending with study sessions and community workshops, and again, study sessions with the council, commission, and final adoption hearings. So here's a little bit more detail as promised. One of the items that I mentioned is we created branding. So at the outset of the project, it was important that we created a brand for this to get people familiar and excited with the general plan update. This is an expensive project. It's a multi-year project, so getting people interested was really important. So we came up with project branding. We have our that really runs through all forward-facing documents. So we also have a website. This is really the hub for the project. Up here we have an email notification list that you can sign up for so you can receive email updates. This is where we also house all of the documents that are produced for this project. It ends up being a library. What's really great about these websites is they are 100% accessible, so they're translatable in up to 50 languages. Those that are have vision issues, there are abilities in here that you can turn on to facilitate the reading and understanding of the material. The general plan website is also where we interact the most with residents and those that want to provide us feedback. We have comment features and abilities for interactive mapping and surveys that we've facilitated, and is really going to be the hub for anything project related, and is really where people should be directed if they have questions or want to find out more information about the project. Another big touch point that we focus on through this process is newsletters. This is kind of an informal way for us to bring people up to speed on where we are at the project. We've produced 2 newsletters at this point. Following the alternatives process, we will produce another in this phase in a couple more weeks, and we'll send that out to the email list and hopefully generate some more interest and get people back in line with the project restarting. Another important aspect of a general plan update is really data management and mapping. So as you can imagine, when you're doing a general plan, you're looking at zoning and you're analyzing land uses. So ensuring that the GIS or the mapping data that is available to, or that the city has is accurate, that it is up to date. And because we are producing and we're taking a look comprehensively at all of your elements, well, we'll be updating all of your maps as well. So we want to ensure that we have good base layer data. We want good data to put in so that we can get good data out. And so we have a series of online maps and in the existing conditions and trends workbook, which is another deliverable completed, we have maps throughout this. So the existing conditions and trends workbook is, as I mentioned, is another big deliverable that has already been completed. This is really sets a snapshot in time, represents a snapshot in time of Livingston in 2020, which is when this was prepared and put out for public review. It sets the existing, as it says, the existing conditions on the ground today. So we look at economic development, population, look at circulation, we look at just what trends are emerging, and we look at the past to really influence the future goals and policies that are developed through the general plan process. I should mention that this existing conditions and trends workbook is online, so if you want to view that, you are able to. Another very large and important step in this process that has been completed is creating a vision statement and accompanying guiding principles for the general plan. The general plan is a visionary, it's a guiding document. You need some sort of vision or direction to guide that document, and that's what a vision statement and guiding principles represent. They are forward-looking, and here is the vision statement that was adopted back in 2020. So I will read it aloud. In 2040, Livingston is a diverse, multicultural, welcoming, peaceful community with a small town feel. Livingston's schools continue to be the best in the region. Downtown Livingston is home to many local businesses, trendy restaurants, and fun things to do and see. There are many places for friends and family to gather in Livingston. Residents do not worry about water quality or quantity, and the city has achieved a balance between growth and preservation of agricultural lands. So this is really the statement that is guiding the future of this plan, that is guiding the various goals and policies that will end up being a really substantial portion and important piece of this project. Backing and kind of lifting up and supporting this vision statement are a series of guiding principles. I will not read these ones aloud, but imagine these as pillars that back up the vision statement. Did you want to provide on the guiding principles? Okay. And then workshops. So we've hosted a series of workshops. At the time, we were dealing with, of course, COVID. So we were doing virtual study sessions and visionary summits. That is, community engagement is a very large and important aspect of this project, and it is built into each of these phases of the project moving forward. Of course, being that the project has slowed down, we haven't had much forward-facing contact, but we do have study sessions like these, virtual workshops, online surveys, pop-up booths envisioned and scoped for this project. So that's where we have been. I know it's a kind of a lot to throw at you. So before I jump into the land use alternatives, I wanted to hand it back to see if there were any questions about what we've done so far. I will be discussing where we're going a little bit later in the presentation, but if there's any questions so far, I'm more than happy to field them.
Council? Commissioners, any questions?
Don't do what I did.
I don't think that I speak loud enough. One quick question, on your website, what has been your number of hits or people that have looked at that website in the last 6 months? I know it's something you
I would
probably
have-
don't have, but all websites track how many people look at it.
Yeah,
I'm just curious, how many people in the city of Livingston have gone in and actually know the website is there and looked at it?
Yeah, so I would have to pull that information. I can get that to you by the end of this meeting.
That would be important for us to know, because if you tell me there's, in the last 6 months, 20 people have looked at it, that tells me we're not getting the word out to the citizens of Livingston that it exists.
Yeah, I would guess we're not getting very many hits on it because we haven't been trying to get the word out to citizens. This is the first event that we've done in quite a while. And so, for example, the next major public outreach event we'll have is a workshop to talk about the land use alternatives, and that will be widely publicized through a variety of ways, the e-blast and on our website. We have in the past put regular announcements in utility bills, but there hasn't been a reason to do that lately because there's been nothing coming up, but I suspect that we'll start doing that again. At one point in the project, we were doing that on a monthly basis, having just an update, what's going on with the general plan. So we'll restart that when we're ready to try to get input back from people. Right now, that we're not asking them any questions, but we will pretty soon.
Okay, and is it in 3 languages?
Yeah,
The
it's,
website, is it available in 3 languages?
Yeah, I think it's actually up to 50. Yeah, there's a right-hand box at the top that allows you to select which language. There should be quite a substantial list to choose from.
Okay,
and most, if not all, of the documents are printed in English, Spanish, and Punjabi, as well as all of our public announcements.
okay, thank you.
So what we're hoping to really daylight, in addition to this evening of bringing you up to speed on the general plan and update you, we were hoping to daylight these alternatives and open it up to a study session between the commission and council. So I'll briefly just dive into what is the land use alternatives, what am I even talking about? So the land use alternatives is an analysis, it's a tool or a mechanism of contrasting and looking at trade-offs for various land use decisions. Those land use decisions are represented in part of what we call alternatives, and they represent various growth scenarios. What's great about a land use alternatives process, again, is that it allows you to look at trade-offs. So you could have a scenario that focused on economic development, or you could have a scenario that focuses on producing housing. And in those various scenarios, we can look at what the trade-offs are, what are the pros and the cons. For this project, we've developed a total of 3 alternatives. Alternatives can vary. You can have more than 3. Ultimately, though, all of these alternatives will ultimately influence the city council on selecting a preferred alternative, and that preferred alternative is what we will base the environmental impact report on, is what the land use diagram or your general plan land use map will ultimately become. So having alternatives and having these options and these metrics to take a look at before coming up with that important decision is an important step in the overall general plan process. So key topics and concepts that we heard not only from City Council at the outset of the project, but also through our community engagement were these. So focus on downtown and commercial spaces, look at incentivizing and increasing housing supply, focus on employment, bringing in more multimodal transportation, and the addition of more parks and recreational space. So those are our key topics and concepts. And from that, we developed, like I had said, 3 alternatives. So right now what I'd like to do is go through each of these alternatives. Once I've provided the overall overview of each, I'll open it up to a discussion. I do have the ability, if we would like to get specific to specific properties or areas, I do have a PDF that I can open up and we can facilitate more of an interactive session. But as mentioned, 3 alternatives. Alternative 1 is what we call your baseline alternative. And imagine this as business as usual. It is what would forecast out to be Livingston in 2040 if we did not change any general plan land use designations. So no changes to density, intensity, no expansion of the city limits or of the sphere of influence. And this really sets the foundation or point of comparison for the 2 other alternatives that we've developed. Here is a map, an image of kind of what this looks like. Again, this is what your existing general plan land use map looks like, all the various colors and whatnot. What will not show up on your existing general plan are these areas that we've extruded and brought up. And there are a total of 8 of those, and we are calling those focus areas. And those are areas in the city that we are actually anticipating there being change. We don't anticipate through this process that every single parcel in the city will have a new general plan designation. And so to make this process easier to understand and really pinpoint where development is likely to occur, we create these focus areas. There's a total of 8, kind of Gallo West to the northwest, and then kind of the Sultana exit down to the south. Alternative 2 takes a look at what would happen if the city were to focus on infill development. So looking at existing vacant and underutilized land, increasing intensities, looking at infill projects. Some large takeaways from this particular alternative is we've created an agricultural land use designation for the existing agricultural areas within the existing sphere of influence. We've replaced the downtown commercial land use designations with a mixed use designation with a higher intensity, density that allows a greater variety of land uses as well. We've also created a new designation to separate out the estate residential uses that are in the city. And then we grouped all of the reserve land use designations into a single land use designation called the urban reserve. And this is more for organizational and housekeeping purposes. And here is what this alternative looks like. So some high-level concepts that I'll point out is, again, so we have a focus on agriculture. You'll see there's a lot more green involved with this alternative, specifically in the Gallo West area. We also have mixed use, so right in the downtown, that's going to be that pink. And then the urban reserve, so all that hatched pink on the extending near the city limits. I'll mention that this alternative does not propose an expansion to the city limits, so it's just development. We're just looking at development that exists within the existing city limits. And alternative 3 is what we're calling an expansion scenario. And this proposes looking at annexing land outside of the city limits, kind of on the urban fringe. Again, as a point of comparison, this is not by any means what we're recommending, whether we're just looking at it. If we were to take into consideration additional land, what are the trade-offs of that? So what the major takeaways of this alternative are conversion of surrounding agricultural into urban uses. So whether that be commercial, residential, or for industry. There's also the increase of increasing the downtown maximum floor area ratio, so a kind of an intensity requirement, increasing that by 0.5, so to 1.5, so allowing more dense development, and more intense and dense development. The creation of an estate residential land use designation, and then again, grouping all of this reserve land on the fringe into a single designation just for housekeeping. And here is how alternative 3 would look at from a land use map perspective. Big change here is that Gallo West, we're proposing a kind of a new designation called a specific plan designation. And what that would really just necessitate is that before development could occur in a particular area, a specific plan would have to be submitted and approved in order for development to take place. Again, these are just options, these are ideas and for consideration. This specific plan concept could most certainly be applied to other focus areas or other portions of the city, so not just Gallo West. So those are the 3 alternatives that we've developed thus far. What we have not done so far is run the metrics for these or determine what are the actual pros and cons. Before we do that, that's a timely endeavor. We wanted to sit before you all this evening to take a look at these land use changes, see if there are changes that should be made before we go through the modeling and build out process. The end result from this is we will have 3 alternatives that we will have metrics for. We will then summarize those 3 alternatives, present those back to the Planning Commission and Council, and from there, we can facilitate a dialogue as to maybe a hybrid general plan land use designation or the land use changes that we will actually make as part of the general plan. So I will open it up to initial sets of questions, if there are any. Did you have anything else?
Council, any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of know the answer, but I know in some of them we're designating some zones, limited industrial, so forth. If the applicant or the property owner wants to come in later for another proposed zone, do we have the flexibility, or how does that work?
So for the general plan, yeah, so we would propose a land use designation change potentially for a specific piece of property. If a property owner would like to come in after the fact and go through a general plan amendment, they certainly could. It would be a costly endeavor, and we would recommend that if there are to be land use designation changes, that those would be accounted for in the overall general plan.
Prior to the adoption, right?
Correct. If we could somehow merge those, and it would be in the city's interest, it would be the applicant, and also would be in line with the direction and the vision statement.
Yeah, and I know you could do that, but the question was asked. It would be helpful. I don't know how we're going to reach out to within the zones we're proposing, or whatever plan we adopt. Are we going to be contacting those property owners? Says, hey, we're going to be designated. Do you have any alternative idea? Are we contacting those folks at all? Are they all contacted at this time?
So no property owners have been contacted at this time because we're not at that stage where we've made any sort of changes. Right now, we're at that very high level, just coming up with concepts. Certainly, property that will go through a designation change, they will be notified, and we will. How that is, we'll have to defer to the city of what the normal process.
Yeah, because that will be, I think, something that we should do prior to adoption is have the property owners, affected property owners, made aware of it. So if they have other alternatives for designation, maybe they can propose it. At least can be considered and not have to go through a costly endeavor down the road.
Yeah, the general plan process and changing the land use designations and which is essentially adopting a new land use map, isn't subject to the same notification requirements if you rezone that property, where you
Right.
have to notify the property owner and everybody within 500 feet. We do our best to do wide notification of these upcoming events, let people know what's going on. We don't do legal, formal mailings to every property owner, but we could if that's the desire of the council. It would just be
Yeah, you know,
a cost item, basically.
yeah, it may be a cost item, and I understand that, but I think at least it'll be worth a letter, not necessarily anything registered, to the property owner, say, here's something we're proposing, do you have any alternatives? Just a letter, it doesn't have to be any formal notices or anything. And I think that would be something worthwhile to everybody.
But, Councilman, what you're talking about is when you get to a point where you've kind of made a tentative decision about your preferred land use alternative that we then take and build a general plan around, and eventually the EIR analyzes that. You're suggesting at that point where the council says, yeah, we want to, this is our preferred
Yeah.
land use arrangement, where there are changes from what the current general plan designates property, to identify all the properties that would be affected by that new plan and notify those property owners. Is that your thinking?
That's kind of what I'm, excuse me, that's what I'm kind of referring to, because I see what the plan is, and I've had folks contact me through just outside of certain areas, property owners. I said, keep an eye on our general plan as it comes forward. You need to start attending. Usually when I ask them, what, if you want to be, do you have any ideas what you want to do? And sometimes they don't, or they don't even know what's, you know. So, but I just don't want to, at least let them know about it. That way, hey, we contacted you, guys didn't show up. Well, now you got to go through your, whatever general plan amendment we have to do, and here's the cost now.
So, I kind of slightly hesitate to mention this because it's a bit complicated, but in one general plan update we've done in the valley, and that was for San Joaquin County, the Board of Supervisors, at the request of actually a couple of land use lawyers who represent larger developers in the county, asked if we would go through a process of soliciting property owner requests for land use designation changes. And so I can't remember that exactly how we notified everybody, but the word went out that if you want, as a part of the general plan process, have your land use designation or the designation on your property changed, send us a note to that effect, and we'll analyze it, bring it all back to the Board of Supervisors, well, first the Commission and then the Board of Supervisors, to make a decision on each one of those properties. So it's possible to do that. That delayed that project for a year, and I can't remember the additional cost, but it was probably $150,000 worth of staff and consultant time to go through that fairly detailed. I mean, we had maybe 200 requests, and granted, the county's a lot bigger than
The
city of Livingston, but if you got 40 or 50 or 100 requests, it's a really complicated process to go through, but it's doable. And that they did it, and the board seemed happy with the process. It just has these other time and cost implications.
Thank you. Just food for thought for the council to see if we want to go down that road at all. But at least I think folks should have some knowledge of what's going to happen, and maybe have some input, maybe not change it, but at least they know what's going to happen.
I think the reality is, looking at your current general plan land use map and these possible changes, that the bulk of the potential change that we'll be evaluating is increasing the property potential.
Right.
And increasing choices that the property owner has rather than decreasing them. So in general, that's kind of my initial takeaway, is that we're looking for changes that create a more vibrant community and implement the vision, which is economic development, economic vitality. All of that means positive change. I think the significant potential change that may be controversial is the one you went through on your last effort to update the general plan unsuccessfully, and that's outward growth. How much do you want to grow out and convert ag land to urban uses? I think that will be the flashpoint.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct in that. And I think we need to be somewhat conservative and more realistic what we're going to go towards. But also, it is going to 2040. None of us have a crystal ball to know what's going to be. And now they're projecting that Valley's going to grow, but you ask two entities, they're going to have different numbers for you. So it's kind of hard to predict. But it's still kind of a little bit early, but down the road, I still would like to contact the property owners, at least know what's happening. That way they can attend as well.
If I may, there are ways we can go ahead and proceed with this. Certainly, the general plan has language for some time, and people get disenfranchised or lost the interest about what's going on with the general plan. What we are having to do is now reintroduce that and introduce the process. One way that we can go forward with this, of course, is utilize our billing for utilities, for example, and identify that we are, once again, moving forward with our general plan, and we are interested in their interest as to how we should grow in the future, what are their aspirations or what they would like to see. Certainly that will only go out to the citizens and businesses within our community. It won't reflect to the property owners outside our city limits or who do not utilize our municipal services. We can look out and grab a broader ban on that particular case nonetheless. We do reach out and continue to reach out for those who've asked us in the past to be informed about the general plan process. So they are still getting that notification. They did receive that notification in regards to this particular process. So we continue to build that, and we'll certainly will lean on that. One of the things, of course, with the general plan and the expansion of that, we have to be cautious about how far we do grow to avert that, land grab scenario. The states don't respect that very highly, and they do get concerned, so does LAFCO. And so we have to recognize what our population projections are in order to satisfy that land mass or that land growth, whether we grow horizontally or vertically to meet those demands. And so there are many ways we can look at this, but certainly we can outreach to the various public members, property owners, to see where that goes, and to find out in a comprehensive approach whether there is a balance between the neighboring properties so that we don't have a patch quilt, if you will, of various different land uses that are not of like or have friction between one another. You certainly don't want to go that. So by mere ask by a property owner saying, I would like my piece of property to be commercial, for example, or another one saying I want it industrial. Well, if it's adjacent to certain residential sensitive uses, we probably could not entertain that request, and to find out again with that balance, and of course how it works with infrastructure being circulation and the utilities that need to support that type of land use.
Yeah, that is a very good point, Mr. Condit. I agree with you wholeheartedly. You don't want to put industrial next to residential. I understand. It was more of where some years ago, Livingston has changed. The property owners around us have changed as the elderly have retired and given it to their through their kids or to have sold out to others. There's been a lot of change out there and what it was last time we were working on a general plan. And it was just to make sure that they're brought to the fold in the beginning. And we're not going to be able to entertain somebody says, hey, I want to bring in 200 acres. We have to be realistic, and also, we're not going to be able to help everybody in what they want. We have to. A general plan is exactly that. We're going to set certain things. We all know what that is, and within those guidelines, I think it is still worth working with neighborhood property owners to make sure that at least they're aware of it. Maybe they have no say in it, but there has been some change out there as well. So that's what I was referring to.
Absolutely.
I wanted to just mention one thing occurred to me during Michael's presentation to make it clear to the council and to the commission that while we have these three alternatives that we've worked with your staff to kind of represent what are realistic differences that make sense to compare, they don't constrain the commission and council on doing something different when you bless a preferred alternative. So in other words, we do the analysis, we have a workshop, we get community input, comments on what they like and don't like about it, bring that back to you, and then talk about what maybe a hybrid of that. And there may be something that we didn't analyze, like an expansion of the residential development into an agricultural area that the council ends up saying, we really want to add that to the plan, maybe based on testimony that you hear from somebody that say, hey, my property wasn't even evaluated here, why not? You aren't constrained by what we evaluated. You can make the map whatever you want.
Yeah, but also the planning and the council have to be somewhat understanding that we're not always making the right decision, because we may have dreams for big cities, but it doesn't mean it's realistic.
What was that population number again, Gopal? What was that?
Well, I wasn't part of that, okay? But anyway, 100,000, I get it, okay? But what I'm just saying is, working with you folks, staff, everybody, we also need to make sure that you guys do ground our feet to the ground in more realistic manner as well. You know, if I sit there and say, let's go ahead and let's get hit into middle of Atwater, well, you're going to say, wait a minute, you're not going to do that, you know. So we need to be able to hear that as well. And it's going to be a lot of work and maybe toning down some expectations of what we think may be, or for some folks, maybe increasing their expectation. There are folks in the community thinks that we should remain where we're at now, never move, don't build another home. So it's going to be kind of a tough work for all of us, but I think that's where we're going to rely on the experts as well.
Yeah, this planning process is aspirational, and it's intended to, as I said earlier, it's an opportunity to look at all these different issues and that affect community change, and do your best to identify a plan going forward. But as we all know from our experience in the last 15 or 20 years here in the Valley, we've had a recession, housing prices tanked here, the development went south, come back some, then the pandemic hit, then we all of a sudden, I don't know why it's as big a surprise, but it is a bit of a surprise to me, is how out of touch the real estate prices have gotten now, and what the housing issues are that are now challenging us here. So there's these ebb and flows of changes within that none of us have any control over, and the best that you can do is have an aspirational plan that is grounded and realistic based on the analysis that we do, and it's the best we can do, and then adapt as changes occur. We'll have a recommendation in the plan to go back every 5 years and do a focused review. It'd just be a technical review. You wouldn't necessarily even have to hire a consultant to do if you didn't want to. Just have staff go back and go, is this policy working? Did we do that program? Is all this still relevant? And basically do a check-in to say, yeah, it's still working, or, well, we thought this was a good idea, but it really hasn't panned out, so we're going to try this instead. So once you get this done, the general plan, you don't want to just move on and wait till the next general plan update comes up. You want to keep in touch with it. The staff will do annual reports to you on the progress on implementing the general plan. Those can be touch points where you go, yeah, what we thought was really going to happen isn't happening. We ought to think about modifying the plan here to address this issue. So it's an ongoing thing because it's really your kind of big aspirational document for how you're going to guide Livingston's change.
So I do have, I think it's two questions. One, and I think this is, but anyway, so let me ask one question first. It's what, and probably it's already allowed. If not, maybe we can look into it at the possibility and how this council feels about a mixture of industrial residential. What I mean by that is where we can look at and consider whenever somebody's building from the bottom up or adding to it, to consider like the first floor to be considered for industrial downtown, but also the second or third floor consider residential, and that's and so is that something? Just I think I already know the answer, but is that something that we already have, and if we don't have, to make sure that we have that right language, thinking long term.
So something like that does not currently exist. For the downtown area, though, we have proposed a mixed use, which would be a new land use designation. And I think oftentimes people just think of that as residential and commercial, but really it's a mixture of any uses. So you could encourage that mix of a kind of a more lighter scale industrial or with kind of a mix of residential or office. So there is the ability to then craft zoning districts that implement that general plan land use designation, where you can get even more specific and create very specific development standards and allowable land uses. So the answer is yes, and that's what's really exciting about this process, is that these new ideas and these desires can actually now move forward into a policy in some sort of direction.
And then, go
Can I
ahead.
clarify? So when you talk about industrial on ground floor and residential above, are you thinking of more like a live-work thing where the residential would be for employees of the industrial use?
No,
Okay.
so for instance, for them to be separate. First floor, it could be retail,
Commercial.
and then second floor, apartments. Some, I know that, for instance, Gastine has some of the older buildings. I mean, it's not something new, but it's just been there for a long time, where the first floor is just retail, primarily retail, and then the second floor are used for apartments, and especially in downtown areas, in the new cities or just cities, where space is limited, but at the same time you want to be able to, build up and be able to use that for, sometimes probably office space is not what they want in the second or third floor, but maybe, it would be a good opportunity for apartments or some residential.
We are looking at that
Okay.
as one of the options. Just for food for thought, there are two other kind of related concepts. One is an example from a community we're working in, a tourist-oriented city, that a hotel developer is building, I think, 30 micro units on the site of the hotel for hotel employees to live in. So it's essentially company housing, but that's one option. There's another thing called live-work or work-live. Supposedly there's a difference, but these are places that provide opportunities generally for individuals to live and have a workspace that's something other than remote working on the computer, but it could be an artist, live-work artist loft where they live there and do their artwork. But there is that concept, and it generally is predominant in really high-density urban areas where you're oftentimes converting older industrial uses into, redoing them into new, more contemporary spaces, and that's one option.
And I think what you just mentioned is something very similar to a project that a college district in Colorado is doing for them to attract professors to come and work in Colorado. For them to recruit, they had to build their own housing, because even though they might recruit someone from out of state, a professor from out of state, or just employees from out of state, their residential is very limited and or very expensive. So they're building their own condominiums or apartments that is strictly only for their, for their employees.
UC Davis did that as well.
I'm sorry?
UC Davis did that.
Okay.
As a part of
Yeah.
their campus expansion some
All right.
years ago, so.
And, yeah.
Really
And-
important.
Yeah, and my other question was, because it was a question that was asked to me before this meeting, was how would the not having currently the tax sharing agreement with the county affect any of the process?
You want me to take a crack at that?
Yeah.
Well, the short answer is, I don't know. We've been aware of that from the beginning. It's a problem for the city in terms of your development approvals, but it's a little bit out of my area of expertise. We don't deal with that very much, but from what I can tell, it is a problem, and hopefully you can resolve it. Because it is, yeah, it does create some issues attracting development.
Thank you. Council, any other questions, comments? Commissioners?
One quick question. I keep trying to push it in the slides. The SOI, I know it's a sphere of influence, but the average person, everybody won't look in and does it. I would like to have alternative 1, 2, and 3 presented to a future Livingston Planning Commission meeting by our director, and explain what the SOI is. I've never heard of an estate residential land use before. We're possibly going to have 2 or 3 members on the planning commission. This needs to be on the planning commission agenda and explained to the 3 of us here and possibly the 2 or 3 new members, so they'll have an understanding of what was presented to us tonight, maybe in our June meeting. But I think it needs to be transferred that way, because you didn't identify SOI that I could see, but I know it was your sphere of influence from looking at the maps. And I don't know what a state residential land use is. Does that gonna tell me you're gonna have HOAs? I mean, there's a lot of questions here that I think the planning commission needs to have just a little bit better understanding of what's being presented now, especially with 3 new members possibly coming. That's all.
Thank you for the feedback. We'll meet with city
For the
staff.
council, yeah, it's for their attention.
I'm going to throw a few ideas for your thoughts, if you will, to help us understand where you would like to see the city grow. Let's take, for example, today on our general plan, much of the lands that abut our river, Merced River, is pretty much identified as either industrial reserve. Does the city wish to have something in an alternative towards that? And let's say, for example, we know, of course, Foster Farms is on the north side of the 99 corridor abutting the river. Would you like what we have identified in the Gallo West area, something other than industrial, maybe perhaps entice in residential and or commercials opportunities that they can capitalize on the river frontage in lieu of industrial, which is generally not accessible by the general public?
Well, thank you for mentioning that. And I know that not that I've been approached, but it's been, questions in the past is like, what are some of the things that we could use that land for? That land to the north, or like right in the center for people to have a good idea. That sits well, actually, the land that sits behind the wastewater plant, there's some property that is of the city, But, so what would be some of the options? You know, some people have mentioned create like a park area, like a green space area with the picnic area, but then again, it's like, who would want to go picnic right behind the wastewater plant, you know, in the summer, in the month of July when it's, you know, but it's just,
Well, I think we have a wastewater treatment plant, and I think where the mayor is going, can we use the river for other purposes or for recreating? And certainly this general plan can look towards that end, identifying that as an open space corridor for what you can kind of connect. Really, where we have the old wastewater treatment plant that is used for other purposes today and is being in reclamation, and can we continue this stream, if you will, of open space along that so that people can recreate, use it as both for events and as well as for walking, biking, et cetera, to get one side or the other side of 99. But we also have that big, large swath of land that is in between the wastewater treatment plant and that of 99. What's your window? What do you want to have for the first view of the public that drives 99 from the north into this community? What do you want then to first grab hold of and say, aha, here's Livingston. I want to take and turn off at Winton Parkway, or I want to turn off at Hammett because I'm enticed. It's the same thing also, as you know, we have ACE. The ACE stop will be in our community. It will be by Main Street. So that will change the dynamics, certainly, about what we have today, and could be served as a catalyst of what we want for the future. So what dynamics would the council and the commission like to see surrounding our ACE train station that, again, invokes a positive feel to the general public wanting to come into our community, spend time in our community, spend dollars in our community and such, and that we also use and benefit to go elsewhere via the ACE train and for the commute. I think one of the comments made by the mayor, certainly providing a vertical mixed-use type development, whereas commercial or businesses are on the first floors, residential living upstairs. You have that transit opportunity for that commute to people who live there, or businesses can capture the employees that get off the ACE and actually work here in Livingston, and again make it more vitality in our downtown, such that it's not 8 to 5, but actually 8 through 10 p.m. type environment, something that lasts a lot longer, and again brings the tax dollars in our community, as well as a populous growth, and be a little bit more dense in those particular areas, so which we could capitalize on some other transit values. So again, these are just thought-provoking ideas I want to extend out to you as commissioners and council members as to what do you foresee or desire in our community, and how should we grow? Where should we grow? Should we be concentric to the 99 corridor? Should we expand northerly or southerly and be balanced one way or the other, or continue to extend along the 99 corridor as we move down to Sultan interchange and capitalize on that interchange for, again, business purposes?
Thank you. Council, any other questions, comments at this point? Commissioners?
Gary, I can say that I appreciate what you said. Again, the focus coming off the 99 corridor is what's going to attract travelers into Livingston. So on both sides of the highway, we need to have an attraction. And I know that a while back that the area that, excuse me, that Jose had brought up, and there was talk about bringing a ATV park out there, and for some reason it was shot down. So if we did, for possibility of those types of attractions that can bring in outdoor sporting events to those areas are possible. I truly wish you were back here back then when that item was a hot topic. I mean, again, it can be a hot topic, and it probably is amongst some of the residents in Livingston that enjoy outdoor sporting events. So knowing that those are possible, and it could have been possible for building out towards that area, thank you.
Yeah.
Those are some of the visions that Livingston needs to know that are possible, so that we can incorporate them to some of the ideas that we want to bring forward to be a vibrant town and a place that people want to come to. We need to attract them, and those are the ways that we can.
So to add on to that, is there something or statistics that you have that you might be able to share with us when we're making this decision on what entices people to live in a community that meets our mission statement?
Possibly. Yeah, let us think about that. You know, I'm taking notes, and we'll make a note of this to kind of brainstorm a little bit how we might address that issue. What are things that, because you're focused on the traveling public, people that are coming by that get off for some reason, or that are using 99 to access Livingston because that thing is in the city. Is that basically what you're saying?
Right, that where you're driving down the 99 corridor and just think, instead of thinking, oh, Livingston, it's, oh my gosh, this is Livingston. And what people would be looking for.
Did you happen to bring back any of the information that was done in that forum back in 2020, where we did actually have a workshop where many members of the community came? They were around the room and they jotted down a bunch of items, their vision of what they would like to see for Livingston. Did you bring any of that back? Because that would answer Renee's question.
Yeah, no, we haven't looked at that, but thanks for reminding me, because you had a facilitator come in and facilitate that discussion, right?
Correct.
It was and I was at that discussion. So I think we have the results of that, so we'll go back.
Yeah, well, and so the results were reflected in these alternatives as the baseline. So looking at what were the key concepts. So we took some of those key concepts as much as possible and tried to fold them into these comparisons. So an infill versus an expansion. I believe there should be a summary online. I'll confirm that provides a breakdown of summary of feedback received. But yes, those did influence these alternatives at their foundation. Of course, that's kind of been changed and workshopped with city staff. But from the starting point, we always take community feedback as the starting point.
So at this point, after this workshop, what would be, just to make sure that we're giving or providing not necessarily direction, but recommendations on us to how to proceed or what to have, what is it that you need to have prior to the next step in the process. I think that will be very important to make sure that everybody understands what it is that you are looking to take away from us.
So from this evening, what we were hoping for was just a thumbs up, essentially. Are the concepts, the alternatives that we've come up with, the land use designation combinations, are those something that you would be interested in analyzing? Are there tweaks to properties or land use designations that you would like to see reflected? Based on the information that we've received thus far, there is this desire to take a look at 99 and Sultana, look at mixed use. We've already incorporated those concepts. So I don't see too much change to the alternatives, at least from the feedback that I'm hearing right now. So what our next step would be to upload or essentially run statistics on these alternative concepts and provide those outcomes to the Planning Commission and the council. So you would be able to see, how many housing units could we foreseeably produce if we were to do this, or what would be the economic or the employment base if we were to make this area commercial. We'll have all of that ready for you. So I think tonight was just more of a ground truthing. Does this make sense? Are these alternatives that you would like to see before we actually go through the formal process?
Okay, council, staff, any other questions, comments?
So you're actually going to analyze the three? We don't have to select just one, or give you direction on?
So we'll provide we'll provide you the statistics on all three. We'll then facilitate a discussion as to, do you want to pick one alternative over the other, or do we come up with a hybrid? That hybrid will be your land use map, your general plan map.
Can you go back to one of the land use maps? So, in all likelihood, there are eight focus areas that are kind of stand out. And as Michael pointed out, the areas that are popped out, we aren't analyzing for any change. They're pretty well-established neighborhoods, or well-established plans. So there's not a lot of areas subject to change, at least from our and the staff's view. But when we do an analysis, we'll come up with some analysis of each of the focus groups, so you'll be able to compare the differences between each of the focus groups. So downtown, probably one of the more prominent ones. So you look at the three different alternatives that we've done, and you'll be able to get a sense of how many more housing units, how much more commercial between one or the other. And then, as Michael mentioned earlier, most of the time, at the end of this long process, a council will pick essentially a hybrid. We'll go, yeah, we really like focus area one, example out of alternative one. But focus area 3, that's really alternative 3 is the best one for that area. So you'll almost certainly mix and match these, and then we'll ultimately come up with a description of what that means. You know, how many housing units, commercial, that kind of thing.
So at this time, just to, I think it's important, I just wanted to be able to, since this is a work, it is a joint meeting, and it is a special meeting, but I think it's important just to make sure that since we already gave an opportunity to provide and for the residents to listen to some of the conversations and the questions, to allow residents to see if they have any questions from anything that was talked about. So I'm going to go out for public comment, see if there's anybody on the phone that has any comments or questions about this specific item. Coming back into the chamber, are there any citizen comments in regards to this item on the agenda? Seeing none, bringing it back. Okay, go ahead.
Can you move that, those,
The slides. Can you go back real quick?
So which slide were you looking for?
I just don't understand why you don't fill everything in and you have Sultana out here with nothing.
So that boundary was developed, or that the boundary was developed with city staff about a year ago, just to look at what the probable area of changes, or at least the boundary that would guide our analysis, or at least kind of contain our analysis. I don't think there was any real special delineation between selecting certain properties and not others. It was just more of kind of creating a boundary area for us to focus in on.
Yes, go ahead.
Leo Castillo, resident and real estate developer. Just some feedback. I hear economic development at a lot of these meetings, whether it be planning or city council, where everybody says we want economic development, we want to do the general plan. amendment for economic development. As a builder and a developer, I can tell you, I can give you a comment regarding why the cost of housing is so astronomical. It's a lot of red tape. It takes a long time to get these projects. Even a simple project sometimes takes 2 or 3 years. And as a developer, there's holding costs that ultimately get passed on to the end user, whether it be a tenant or whether it be a homeowner. So in this general plan amendment is, be nice to hear feedback from the council on planning is, if they do want economic development, if they do want more housing, streamline the process, make it simple, where you engage with developers to bring the much needed and much wanted economic development and housing that you guys are saying is needed. And the whole, one of the reasons for the general plan update is to bring more housing, which is very, very much needed in the city, in the county, in the state. And my feedback to you guys, it's simple, supply and demand. If there was more housing than there was demand, prices wouldn't be the way they are. Same thing for rents. So just streamline the process, make it simple, and be proactive. And if you want economic development, make it, where there's a set of guidelines and you can, and it makes it encouraging for developers to come and build. Because if you say you want a project, and we approach the city, and it's going to take 3 years to do it, we're just not as motivated to bring projects when it's difficult to get them through the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional comments in the chamber? Seeing none, bringing it back to the dais. Okay, council, any last minute?
So you're coming back to the table with us again when?
I don't believe that we've set a time at this point. That we're envisioning that this phase, however, when we pick it up, would be around 3 to 5 months, I think that's what we're estimating.
And at that time, is there going to be better outreach? Because I do see property owners too, maybe some others, but for the most part, to have their feedback and for us to actually go and analyze this with you and not knowing pros and cons of each alternative helps us to sleep on this in those 3 to 4 months. So having that back and forth with you instead of this one evening where everybody's going to come together and try to discuss it within an hour and a half. I mean, we started late, so what is that going to look like for us?
So luckily nothing's been formed yet. So everything's digital. It's in digital form. We haven't conducted any analysis. So from this evening, as mentioned, this allows us to actually run our analysis and run the model. So we can provide those numbers and those metrics to you. Those will be in a report style format. That will be out on our website. There will be newsletters, and we'll have a newsletter that's dedicated just to this alternatives phase to underscore the importance of being involved. And then there will be engagement. So we can do pop-up events, or we can do community workshops. I think community workshops are scoped for this particular phase. So that is in which we would go and daylight the results, the various alternatives to the public. We could take comment in a very informal environment, pens and pencils, and really start to mark up the paper and work on those alternatives.
Yeah, we're planning on that back and forth with the council, but we want to give you useful information to inform your decision and to form this back and forth discussion. So it will be this analysis, and then are the results of us taking these out to the community and getting community feedback, and we'll bring that back to you. So we'll say, here's what our analysis shows statistically about the comparative differences of these approaches. Here's what we heard people tell us. Here are the things that they liked, and here are the things they didn't like. And bring that back to you. Well, first we come to the Planning Commission, and they end up making a recommendation to you, and then we come to you. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in one hour meeting. We could have a series of discussions with you if you wanted to have more, and we're completely flexible on that. So maybe before we get to that point, we can start having some discussions with staff, and they can also talk with you about what you feel is the most effective way for you to have that discussion and between yourselves and direction to us and the staff.
I think what our consultants are indicating, I think ultimately we're going to get to the step where we need to present to the commission, to the council, a plan, a land use plan in essence, and circulation that says, do we have this right? You know, is this what you guys basically want to see the future of Livingston? If we get the nods, if you will, from our commission, our council, which is a representation of our community, yes, this is where we want to go. That's when we take off on the environmental technically and evaluate that to make sure that we can address all the environmental issues that would be pertinent towards that land use plan, that circulation plan that would be associated with this project, or this general plan update, if I will. Does that help a little bit? I mean, we can come back to the table until we get it right. That is true. But we also have to be mindful towards what we have scoped in our particular package for this particular general plan just the same.
Council, anything else?
I just heard a few things tonight, you know, recreation, our programs, money not to be able to go to recreation, land use, downtown beautification. One of the things that I had written here is that going back and reflecting from 2020 and hearing some of the causes as to why, you know, some things get delayed, projects get delayed. There are other factors as well. So one of the reasons that cities broke because many of our local government right now have put their own self-interests and profits ahead of the needs of the community. For example, we still make our residents go outside of Livingston to spend their money in Merced, Atwater, and Turlock for cannabis medication. Why do we do that? Well, Steve Bassey isn't here tonight, but he makes income off of alcohol sales. Steve Bassey is a planning commissioner, and in the past, shouldn't planning commissioners with a conflict of interest be allowed to consistently vote on planning commission against projects which would decrease his revenue? We have an empty building on Main Street which promised to bring over $2 million a year in tax revenue to the city, as well as improvements to the corner, which was voted against by Roth, Jason Roth, Mr. Wallace, and Steve Bassey, claiming the downtown should be a drug-free zone, even though there are drugs and liquor stores all around that building, which don't promise to even come close to the $1 million a year. Yet Wallace and Roth went along with voting against the incoming producing project because you all wanted to be in good graces with Bassey and not bring anything into the town which would interfere with his profits. It was even stated that exception to the applicant telling him that cannabis would be grown on any parcel, even in front of any school. Should planning commissioners be taking exception when being presented with facts by applicants? Should we be shooting the messengers and applicants? Doesn't that deter any other applicants from wanting to do business with us? Even the mayor has said, no cannabis downtown. But he's okay with alcohol, tobacco, cigarettes, Norco, Percocet, Oxycontin, all of which kill thousands of our residents every year. Mayor isn't a doctor or a nurse or even a pharmacist to be deciding what medication should go where. His decisions and views are based on wanting to punish people that need cannabis. His views are racist against his own people, making them drive out of town for their much-needed medication because he thinks it's cool to be racist, so long as he has a few racist buddies that will agree with him. The city of Livingston didn't happen to find itself broke and losing its fire station by accident. The city was driven destitute into poverty by Moran, Espinoza, Sammer, possibly Roth, Wallace, and Bassey, and other selfish, self-interested persons who got into politics and local government not to give our residents safer alternatives and a higher quality of life, but rather to use their positions to protect the profits of their businesses and their friends' businesses. Without this clarity of who put us in this position and why, we won't be able to do properly plan ahead. The city has been perverted by those rights here in the government today who still seem to believe that the public doesn't know what's happening. I can assure you, they know and are learning more about it every single day. We had a beautiful theater downtown, and it was destroyed by those in power today. Let's not forget that as we move forward.
Council, commissioners, any other comments, questions for staff? Well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned at 7:04. We'll be back in about 5 minutes for our regular council meeting. Meeting is adjourned.